This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Tom Arnold. Tom is an Irish agricultural economist and public policy advisor who has worked for the European Commission, the Irish Department of Agriculture and Food, and Concern worldwide. He's served on governmental and non-governmental bodies at Irish, European and international level, with a particular focus on sustainable food systems and nutrition. In this episode, you'll hear about Tom's long career in public policy, Ireland's unique role on the world stage in addressing hunger and malnutrition, and he'll also share how a small island nation is helping shape the future of food systems across an entire continent. Let's get into it. Tom, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
I want to dive straight in. Where did your journey to championing nutrition, agriculture and food security begin?
Well, I grew up on a farm in North County Dublin. I was always interested in this, but I studied agricultural economics for my degree, and then I worked with the European Commission, and including some years working in Africa. I came back to Ireland and worked with the Farm Advisory Service and the Department of Agriculture, but then I connected with Concern Worldwide, and I was chair of the board of Concern and subsequently chief executive of Concern for 12 years. From 2001 to 2013. And there, Concern did some really important work, particularly in nutrition, with others, pioneered what's now called the CMAM, the Community Management of Acute Malnutrition, which essentially changed the way in which acute malnutrition was dealt with. It gave it a sort of a community and a social focus, which replaced a medical focus. And that is a system now that's adopted worldwide and is in place. So it was during my time with Concern that I really began to engage with the international community on nutrition. And I've kept going since then.
And so how did those experiences working across the Commission, the Irish government, and the NGOs, all of this shape your perspective on global food issues?
Well, I think it brought home to me that if you are to achieve change, it has to be change led by politics. And you have to have champions working in the direction of real change. And that really manifested itself after the 2007-2008 food price crisis, when after a period of literally 40 years of stability in food prices and so on, you had major increases in prices of major commodities. And that in turn led to food riots in 30 countries. And that led to a kind of a reevaluation of the food situation. And we began then to talk about food and nutrition security. And that led on to one example of what had happened was it led on to the creation of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. And I think since over the last 17 years, the world has begun to take nutrition more seriously and needs to take nutrition more seriously.
And being here in Ireland has a rich and complex history that's shaped some of its current position on the world stage. What key events or periods do you think have been most influential in defining Ireland's role in the global community today?
It's really important to recognise that our famine history in the 19th century has left such a deep imprint on this country. And that is reflected in our policy and our prioritisation of dealing with hunger and undernutrition since over the last 50 years. A key moment was in 2007, 2008. There was something called the Hunger Task Force report. And it produced a report which was launched by the Secretary General in 2008. And it came up with a set of ideas which were very timely and seemed to be very relevant. So Ireland at that stage, was playing a really important and influential role in shaping international policy for food and nutrition security, and it has gone on since then. We're now at the point of 2025 where we have three important meetings coming up. We have the Nutrition for Growth Summit, we have the UN Food System Summit, and we have COP30, which is taking, for the first time ever, taking the issue of climate and food seriously. Now, I think Ireland should be playing a really key leadership role in each of these meetings. We've already laid the foundations for that in earlier meetings of each of these conferences. But I think I see 2025 as a really special opportunity to just increase that leadership role and connect with other champions who are thinking in the same way.
And so in terms of the role, what are some of the priorities you think should be focused on in that kind of convening and bringing together?
Well, I think if you take the three, each conference separately, Nutrition for Growth is really an acknowledgement that nutrition is absolutely central to the well-being of a country's population, particularly young people. And nutrition should be featuring very prominently in national policies of every country that wants to ensure its economic and social future. The UN's Food System Summit, the breakthrough in 2021 for the first summit was that an acceptance that you had to begin to look more broadly at food and food systems. And Ireland is, I think, a leader in developing. It has developed its own agri-food strategy on the basis of a food systems approach. So we've lessons to learn. We're learning lessons, and we've lessons that are relevant to other people. And then the third meeting, the COP30 meeting, led by Brazil. And Brazil, I think, is deeply committed to putting food, the link between food and climate, at the center of COP30. That builds on already an achievement in COP28 in Dubai, which led to something called the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action. And those words are carefully chosen. And when you connect those things, you begin to have the basis for a policy that really acknowledges that tackling climate and ensuring food and nutrition security are part of the same agenda.
Absolutely critical to connect the thread, I guess, through this. So in terms of Ireland particularly, how do you think Ireland can leverage that platform? So you were saying bringing people together, thinking about that. What are some of the ways Ireland might be able to do that?
Well, I think you look for countries and individuals and organizations that share your basic agenda. And then you define for each of these countries issues that really you want to emerge from each meeting and form partnerships to go after that goal. So I think it's actually relatively simple. In the wake of the Hunger Task Force in 2008, we really did develop key partnerships with governments. At the time, the UK government was a critical leader, the US government, the EU, individuals like David Nabarro, who was in a role as Special Envoy for the Secretary General at the time. So threading together a number of what you would identify as the key influencers and shapers of policy. That's the way to do it. And I mean, it's relatively simple.
So you've recently been appointed as the independent chair of the Ireland Africa Rural Development Committee. How do you see this initiative really contributing to Ireland's global impact on food security?
Well, first of all, the fact that the government has set up this committee and appointed Appley as chair of it is an acknowledgement at governmental level that Ireland has a very wide range of connections with Africa. And in a sense, it's challenging that range of connections to see, are they as coherent as they might be? So I think there's real opportunities here to begin to look at that coherence issue. But there's also, it's a very timely appointment or a time establishment of this committee, because there's also important changes about to happen in Africa. Africa is re-looking at its own agricultural and food policy. There's going to be what's called the Kampala Declaration, agreed in January, which is really charting out what Africa wants to do to develop its own agriculture and rural economy. And it's important that we talk about the rural economy as well as the agricultural sector. So it's a moment where Ireland can bring its own experience about using a food systems approach for its own policy and beginning to talk to both the African Union and individual African countries about how that Irish experience might be relevant to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 2, what do you think are the biggest challenges that we're facing at the moment to achieve SDG 2 particularly?
Well, the biggest challenge is that we're not moving fast enough in the direction of what we've set out as the objective of SDG 2. And, there needs to be very honest self-examination in each country as to why that is the case. So the UN Food System Summit +4 to be held in September should be an opportunity for that honesty. Honesty in regard to why things aren't happening as fast as they are, and opportunity to learn from other countries where things are happening more or less in line with the objective. So I see that it's an accountability moment and it's a learning moment.
Over your career, how has your perspective on how to achieve this evolved?
Well, I think I've increasingly got to the point of realizing that it is political action and political decision-making which matter. I mean, we can do all the limited and well-meaning projects that we might do, and they're all part of the picture. But until you get a serious level of political commitment expressed in policy change, you're not going to achieve what you want to do. So that is, we have a moment here. I mean, there's so many awful things happening in the world which are distracting from, what we should be dealing with. We've got Gaza, we've got Ukraine, we've got Sudan, awful, terrible problems that have to be solved eventually. But there's this other space of sort of maybe less dramatic, quieter progress that can be made. And I think Ireland in particular is in a position to say, along with other countries that think similarly, let's do what we can in this space where there's so much to be done.
And 2025 you see as that critical time with those 3 meetings to really see progress?
Yeah, because to some extent the groundwork has already been done to some degree. In the 2021 you had the first Food System Summit, you had the Nutrition for Growth, and I think after a deplorable absence since the COP started in 1995 in Germany, they paid little or no attention to the link between climate and food. And it's only the last couple of years, particularly last year, 2023, under the UAE presidency, that they made a big advance. And now you have an opportunity to take that much further forward. And that is also because I think the Brazilian government is serious about this, and they want to have this issue of climate and food at the center of COP30.
I see that at the moment it needs that political leadership to step up. And so it's great to see you calling on Ireland to really play a role there and to really drive that forward. As you think about and we look to this future, what is giving you hope and what concerns you the most at the moment about 2025 being a key year to drive this?
Well, I think you occasionally get moments where you have the potential for a reset of policy and a reset of political priority. We had that in the wake of the food price crisis in 2007-8. I think now it's the only moment in the interim period where we perhaps have similar opportunities for a serious reset in policy and political priority. And I think people should realize that, and we should be working to optimize that opportunity.
And I guess this year, with so many different elections, it's been quite distracting, but also still good to see the progress that Brazil has led at the G20 and other moments. But I guess next year, once the dust settles, I guess, on many of the elections, we have that political moment as well.
Yeah, well, we may have. There's obviously, if Donald Trump is elected in the US, that is going to diminish the possibility of doing things. It's going to diminish the possibility of clear policies coming out from these meetings, and it's certainly going to diminish the resources that will be available to implement any policies that do come out. So we're by no means sailing into calm water. But if we've had a positive result in the UK elections. The UK now clearly want to re-engage with the world after a decade of insularity and negativity. We've got a possible outcome in the US. I hope that Europe is going to get its act together, and I think it is going to do that. And then you've got the role of individual countries like Ireland, who has a real legitimacy in the fact that it's had consistent policy on the issue of food insecurity and hunger for 50 years. And we need to leverage that reputation and that possibility.
You mentioned 50 years. Just for a minute, what is significant about this 50 years here?
50 years ago, Ireland put in place for the first time its development cooperation policy. And over that period, I think it's by and large been very good policy. And again, it has worked very closely with the EU to influence EU policy. So we're in a remarkably privileged position as a country. Consistent policy, motivated by, I think, the right reasons which relate to our history, and a very strong NGO sector, which is a very important ally in this policy. So we're in a good position to be influential.
Great being here in Ireland and talking with people and seeing that potential for 2025 to be a real year of driving forward on that 50 years, that leadership into the world stage to help gather and bring people together to try and drive forward.
Yeah, obviously I can't predict what the outcome of the next Irish election will be, which will happen within the next 6 months. But another real asset we've had here over the years is that policies on Ireland's role about food and nutrition security don't cause political difficulty. I mean, not only is the government in favour of these policies, but the opposition parties are in favour of these policies. And again, that's a rare enough situation to be in. So I would have, whatever the outcome of the government in the next election, I suspect we'll have a government that's willing to take up this baton and this challenge. And I would hope to make sure that Ireland performs to the optimum degree at these 3 meetings in 2025.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this show.
It's a great pleasure.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.